Okay, welcome back to the videos. It's a brand new year, and I think that means that a lot of you are going to be thinking about either adding a new bike to the collection or picking up maybe your first bike. And having had the chance to ride quite a lot of different bikes at this point, I thought it would be helpful to put together a bit of a video on what I would consider to be the 5 most important things to consider when choosing a new bike. Although I've already got a feeling that some of you are going to find a few of these a little bit controversial, but let's just get into it. Okay, so there's no real priority order to this list, but I wanted to start with something that I think is constantly overlooked by people when they're choosing a new bike, and that is tire width. It's no secret nowadays that wider tires are not only more comfortable, but they're also faster. Gone are the days of 23mm skinny tires on bikes, and even the pros nowadays are riding 28s and sometimes 30mm tires while they're racing. And there's loads of other evidence about why wider tires are faster, but if the pros are doing it, then you can be sure that it actually is faster. But it has taken the bike industry a long time to catch up on this, and some companies are still making bikes that don't even accommodate 28mm tires, but I think that is ridiculous. Like, if it's more comfortable and it's faster, then everybody should be doing it. And so my first suggestion is, if you're considering a new bike, then look at what tire width the bike can accommodate. If you're not racing, then 32mm tires, I think, will just start to become the norm for people. And the same is also true for gravel as well. You might have watched some of Dylan Johnson's content on YouTube before, and he is even more extreme when it comes to tire width. And he competed in the Unbound 200 this year, or last year, 2024, and he finished in 10th, and he was riding 56mm mountain bike tires on his gravel bike. And 56mm is kind of a bit mental, and I don't know how many bikes actually accommodate that width, but at least 50mm is a good place to start. Like, my Reilly Reflex currently has 50mm tires on there, and there's still a little bit more clearance as well. And so I think that's kind of a good point to be looking at if you're buying a gravel bike. Hopefully the more of us that buy bikes with bigger tire clearances, the industry will also catch up. Okay, so the next thing that I would consider is frame material, and this is one of those ones that can be a little bit controversial. With how good manufacturing is these days and technology, the actual differences between materials on bike frame design is a lot less than what it used to be. Like, historically, carbon bikes would ride like carbon bikes and aluminium bikes would ride like aluminium bikes, but today it's a lot less about the material and a lot more about the design of the bike and the geometry of the frame. But in saying that, materials do have like inherent properties, and I think it's worthwhile to consider the material when you're considering a new bike. But the first thing I would probably look at is frame geometry. So if you are looking at a bike that's got a very racy geometry, then you're going to be in a very aero position. It's going to be uncomfortable if you're not flexible, and it's going to be uncomfortable if you're doing longer rides. But if you're racing, then it's perfect. And then on the flip side, like a really relaxed geometry bike is going to be really comfortable for long days out, but it might not quite be the sort of aerodynamic position that you want to be in when you're out riding. And so definitely start with the geometry and kind of try and figure out where you are on the spectrum. Are you thinking of something much more relaxed and endurance orientated, or are you thinking about something more aero and race orientated? And so that's a really good place to start. And then in terms of the materials, I think there's kind of some benefits to different materials. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is balance your budget with materials. And so if you're just getting started and it's like your first proper bike, then aluminium is a great place to start. It's light, it's cheap, it can be fairly comfortable if it's the right design of frame. And so that's a really good place to start. And a lot of the sort of good bike brands make some really, really nice aluminium bikes. But if you've got a little bit more budget, then a carbon bike is definitely an upgrade over aluminium. Carbon bikes often have a bit more of a considered design, and they have strengths and stiffness and lightness all in the right places, because with a carbon bike, you can kind of design it to be whatever you want because of the sort of molded nature of the frame. And often these bikes are optimized for comfort and aero and stiffness, and and the design is really, really smart. And so I think when often you ride a carbon bike, it's gonna feel really good. They're also these days not wildly more expensive than aluminium bikes, or at least some of them aren't. And it's gonna be lighter, it's gonna be a better performer. And if you've got the budget, I would definitely recommend jumping up to the carbon level if you can afford it. But the downside to carbon is it's a little bit more fragile and prone to damage than something like an aluminium or titanium or steel bike. And so you have to be a little bit more careful with it. It's not necessarily the bike that you would want to ride all year round to commute on. And I know of people who have like dropped their bike outside a cafe and then damaged it and it needs to get repaired or replaced, which is something that everyone doesn't want to deal with. And that sort of takes me on to the last category of frame materials, would be your titaniums and your steels. As you might know, I've been riding the Reilly titanium bikes for the last year, and I've genuinely fallen in love with titanium as a frame material. It's comfy, yet it still feels snappy and racy. It's robust, and so you don't have to worry about dropping it or scratches. You might have seen my video about how you can even rub scratches out of titanium bikes. And it's weather resistant, so you can just ride it all year round without having to worry about it. You can ride it in summer and winter. I've had mine climbing mountains, I've had it out in like the rubbish UK winter roads, and that's why I really like titanium as a material. It's got a lot of good characteristics. It's lighter than steel. A titanium bike sort of ticks a lot of boxes for me in terms of a good frame material. It's definitely not as light as carbon is, but I think personally I would take the benefits over that compromise. But the biggest compromise of titanium and steel bikes is that they're expensive. And so these are really sort of luxury items at that higher budget end, if that's where you are. Okay, so for somebody who's a little bit newer to cycling and bikes, understanding group sets and componentry is one of the hardest things. But the main thing these days is that you've got mechanical group sets and electronic group sets. So mechanical group sets are operated with cables between like the shifter and the rear mech and things down at the back. And so you sort of push the shifter, it tensions the cable, and that's how you change the gear. And so that's the kind of historic, traditional way of doing it. But you've now got these electronic group sets, which are like wireless, and it's just a button and a motor will change the gear at the back. I didn't expect to love electronic group sets as much as I do. They are definitely more expensive, and I upgraded my bikes over the last couple of years to electronic, and I really, really do love it. The main benefits for me is one, the shift buttons, you hardly need to press them to change the gear. And so it means however your hands are on the handlebars, you can even flick the gear with like your pinky. Whereas with mechanical groups, you have to sort of use your whole hand to shift the shifter. And so I really like that feature. But you also just get consistent, fast gear changes all the time. Whereas with mechanical group sets, they kind of fall out the window when the cable stretches and ages. And so you have to like tweak the gears to get them sort of perfectly tuned. But with electronic, it's just every time, bang, shift, and they just feel absolutely amazing. And there's other benefits as well, but for me, those are the kind of two reasons why electronic is better than mechanical if you've got the budget. But mechanical group sets are genuinely great, and there's some really, really good options out there if you're looking for something on a bit more of a budget. I would definitely say that Shimano 105 is a really good base level for a group set. That's kind of in the affordable end of performance bikes, and I would definitely be looking there if you were looking for like a long-term bike that was going to serve you really well, and it would be really upgradable as well in the future. So we've talked about the frame material, we've talked about group sets, but there's also other components on a bike, things like a handlebar, stem, saddle, and it's really important to consider these as well when you're buying a new bike. Sadly, for most bikes, you do not get to choose these things if you're buying just an off-the-shelf bike. So the handlebar will be a set width, the stem will be a set length, and the saddle will be whatever brand deal that they've got. And so what that means is when you buy a new bike, you're going to have to change all of those things. And so you've basically paid for a handlebar, a stem, a saddle, and if you're anything like me, as soon as I get the bike, I have to buy a new handlebar, a new saddle, a new stem, which just costs more money than it really needs to. And so I've basically now got drawers just filled with components that I got with bikes that I've then had to change. And it's just wasteful and it's expensive, and I just don't like it. But some bike manufacturers will let you spec these things as you're building the bike. And so Reilly, as an example, you can choose your handlebar, what width you want, your stem length, your saddle, all of these things. You can do that when you're buying the bike. And so it means that when you receive it, it's exactly how it should be and how you need it to be, and you're not going to have to buy any new components. And I wish that more people would let you do this as part of the buying process. But you might be asking, how do you know what size of things that you need, especially if you're looking to get your first bike? Like, how do you know what width handlebars you want? That takes me on to my final point. Riding a bike can be incredibly uncomfortable if you've not got a good fit on the bike. And that can be the difference between you really enjoying cycling and it becoming something that you can do for hours and hours a week, or it can also become something you absolutely hate because you can just never get comfortable. And if you've been following the channel for a while, then you'll know that I'm a massive advocate of bike fits. And a bike fit is kind of like a physio style session where you would go and see an expert who would sort of look at your body type, your riding style, your goals, what you're trying to achieve, and they would essentially figure out the most optimal components and sizes of bike so that you can feel your most comfortable. And like, it's pretty amazing what just a couple of really small adjustments can do to your overall comfort and also avoiding injury and all of these different things. I've got some more videos about bike fit if you want to go and watch those, but I'm an advocate basically. So we've talked about the frame material, we've talked about group sets, but there's also other components on a bike, things like a handlebar, stem, saddle, and it's really important to consider these as well when you're buying a new bike. And bike fit is basically how I know what sizes I need of all of the different things. And so I go and see Dan at UK Bike Fit about once a year, and that sort of dials in my fit based on my level of fitness, my goals for the year, how I'm riding, and we'll essentially optimize all of the different things to make sure that I've got the best fit possible on the bike. So most people would actually get a bike fit after they've bought a bike, which makes sense, but also kind of is a little bit of a waste of money, because what will typically happen is you'll realize that the stuff that you've got is not the right fit and you have to buy new components, new handlebars, stems, all of that kind of stuff. And so a better solution is to go and get a bike fit before you've even bought a bike. And what the bike fitter will then be able to do is tell you what bike size you should buy, what handlebar width you need, what stem length you need, what saddle would be good for you. And you can just buy all of that stuff once and not have to replace it and trial and experiment with different things. And I wasted so much money in the past, like on saddles, because I couldn't find one that was comfortable and I had to just keep buying different saddles. Whereas a bike fitter has probably got loads that you can just try out and choose the one that's best for you. And so it is expensive to get a bike fit, and I'm not gonna beat around the bush with that. But if you consider how much money you'd likely waste on experimenting, or the risk of getting injured or not being comfortable on the bike, then I think it's a really, really good way to spend your money. Even if that means like having to downgrade the group set that you get, I think it's better to invest it in a bike fit than some sort of performance technical thing that you just aren't going to see any benefit in. And so there you have it, my 5 things to consider when you're looking at a new bike. I hope that helps. I hope that was useful. If you've got any questions or anything like that, then leave them down below and I'll do my best to answer them. And if there's anything that I've missed, anything that you think is really important and something that you want to share, then drop it down in the comments. It'd be good to chat to you all there. And I will catch you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers.